Hi, boys and girls. Well, being bipolar brought to you by me, Dewey Snacks. And today is a special one. There'll be no Mick and no movie music in the segment. This is straight out. I was asked by someone that knew me very well, knows me very well. I was asked who was my favorite guitarist of all time, who is my guitar hero. And this individual knows how the answer to that question would take forever. Forever. You know, like reading the Bible? Yeah, each chapter I can come up with for each book was basically stating that I have so many heroes that are guitar players that it would go past the length of the Bible. Okay, but I can bring it down. And in this segment, first, I want to give you a little history according to Doobie Snack's guitar music history. There are so many different angles that people will give you about the creation of rock and roll and the background and how it came about. But to me, it started with Robert Johnson. Now, there's stories about how he sold his soul to the devil just to play like nobody else, right? Well, okay, but there's also stories that he actually went out in solitude and played. And that's all he did was learn how to play. People hadn't seen him for almost 2 years. Then all of a sudden he comes back and he was great. Uh, some of the greatest musicians out there contribute their abilities to Robert Johnson and just learning his music. So you've got Robert hitting the stage. He's spreading out like wildfire in California. I mean, he's going nuts. He's playing live a lot of different places. He screws up, he gets shot or poisoned or something. It's not very clear. There's different stories to it, but he was screwing around and he got killed. He only recorded maybe, well, I don't know, 30 songs, 35 songs, somewhere around there. But if you want to really get a good, interesting grasp of the blues transforming into different genres, there's a movie called Crossroads with Ralph, and he goes through and he basically is classically trained, but he loves the blues. So he gets this guy out. He does his thing. He goes on a journey. He learns the blues, la di da di da. He gets to the end where he meets up with the great Steve Vai. Okay, so now you've got a blues player going up against one of the genius guitar players of all time. It's one of the greatest guitar battles I had ever heard, and I enjoy to this day. Okay, so they're going back and forth, and all of a sudden at the end, it's his classical training that brings him down. You know, so you've got an intermix of music in this one movie that I thoroughly enjoy, next to, you know, Rockstar, which has got, you know, all time greatest guitar player ever in it. But we'll get to that later. So we got Robert Johnson. So la di da, time goes by. In my mind, the world doesn't hit me in the guitar sense, you know, until I get to hearing the first, I would say, Kiss album in my world was Dynasty. And it wasn't much of an Ace Frehley album, I found out later, which is why I really didn't connect with it. But I did connect with Def Leppard's Pyromania and Michael Jackson's Thriller. Now, Michael Jackson, I don't care who you are back in the day, if you didn't have Thriller, you were just ignorant, period. Okay? I don't care what genre. You could be a diehard Slayer fan, but there are times where you can just sit down and listen to a little bit of, Beat It with Eddie going nuts. Okay? By the way, Eddie didn't get paid shit for that. Okay? Michael got all of that. But Eddie bounced off of it, and Van Halen, that's another one. But Def Leppard, when I heard Steve Clark and Phil Collins work together on that album, that was awesome right there. So I didn't have much of anything other than going to the store and looking at picture albums to pick out what I wanted to listen to. Man, at the time, all they had on the radio was this blah blah. You got Madonna was hitting well. I liked Duran Duran. At the time, Michael Jackson. You had Huey Lewis and the News. They were all going crazy, but I was losing that edge. I was losing it all until 1985. I got the Ride the Lightning album by Metallica. That was it. I did not know anything about Metallica. I wasn't at that point yet in the music world, but I got that album. And when I started playing it, my world changed. Everything. James Hetfield. Now, on the Ride the Lightning album, Dave Mustaine is playing on a couple of those songs, and he did write them, from what I understood. Okay? I read the back of the album cover. Okay? And at the time, I didn't know anything about what was going on with Metallica. But you had James Hetfield coming out with these monster riffs that, boom, got your attention. And then you had these leads by either Kurt or Dave, okay, or James at the time. But you had these leads going in, and it was harmonized. It flowed. And James's voice was getting more unique at this time. And I didn't realize it yet. I hadn't heard Kill 'Em All. But Hetfield just introduced a massive riff world to me. So that's when I delved in. That's when everything changed for me. When I get to 7th grade, I started doing everything I could to get all the information I could on the guitar world. I got the prescription or subscriptions to, Guitar World, Guitar Player, Guitar Magazine, Hit Parader, Krig. I had everything coming in. My walls were completely covered from head to toe of pictures of guitar players with their guitars before I even knew who these guitar players really were. Now, at the same time, I started playing guitar myself. I was so influenced that I wanted to learn. I wanted to feel that iconic crunch. I wanted to be a part of that. So I started working day and night and studying. MTV was going pretty good, and they started mixing in a lot of heavier music and musicians. But we still weren't getting the true guitar players. At the same time in 85, the world for me just exploded. I was getting into groups like Ozzy, The Ultimate Sin. Jake E. Lee blew my mind. It was like a whole week of listening to that because it was introduced to me by the great Headbangers Ball. Okay. Headbangers Ball opened me into a world of complete musicians. I mean, guitar players bass players, drummers, you never even would picture. But you've got Motley Crue with Nikki Sixx up there, and he's looking hot. Every girl wanted him on the wall, and then you've got their hair and makeup done up with all. But when Metallica came to town, they opened up the gateway, and it flooded. You got all these great guitar players that are just in these bands. Okay, you got bands like Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, Twins and Twins, twin guitar players everywhere. I mean, the British were coming. The British were coming. And in '85, I didn't have the ability to do the research on these other iconic musicians that led the way for the ones that I am worshiping right now. So I got into all forms. Tony Iommi of Black Sabbath led the way. I'm going to get a lot of argument on this, but between the time of Robert Johnson establishing the blues, Elvis Presley flourishing with it and giving us something more of a guide to help us. Elvis was a genius, period. Then came Tony Iommi. I don't care what anybody says. He is the true riff master. Okay? Hands down. Now, you at the same time, you've got Jimmy Page, who a hands down legend. We all know that. You got Eric Clapton, another blues oriented guitar player, that slow hand. They call him. He's genius. Period. But on the other spectrum, you've got B.B. King going crazy. You got Muddy Waters. You got Albert Lee. Yeah, the spectrum widens during this time frame, and a lot of people have forgotten about some great guitarists like Stevie Ray Vaughan. Now, I don't know if anyone's ever been able to watch, but Stevie Ray Vaughan in his Austin City Limits concert, yeah, he's higher than a kite. But I tell you what, hands down, from beginning to end, I was jaw dropped. Genius guitar work through and through. Stevie Ray Vaughan, hands down, one of the greats. And then I get into Whitesnake. Now, the Whitesnake album came out, and I wasn't too hip on it because I hadn't seen much until I saw the video. And when I see the guitar player at the time using a violin bow on the guitar, it was like, whoa! Adrian Vandenberg. But come to find out later, it wasn't Adrian Vandenberg. That actually is one of the greatest moves by John Sykes. Now, John Sykes, come to find out, did all of the Whitesnake album. So everything you saw in the videos with this all-star cast, Adrian Vandenberg, Vivian Campbell, which, I gotta tell you, Vivian Campbell, his iconic work with Dio. He did a couple albums with Dio, and The Last in Line and We Rock. Oh, Vivian Campbell is a great guitar player, and now he's with Def Leppard. But he was with Whitesnake for a while. And it aggravates me that John Sykes never got the real kudos for that. But with Blue Murder, oh, John exploded. If you ever get the opportunity from front to back, beginning to end, Blue Murder's album is genius. I got the opportunity to see him live. Beautiful artwork. John Sykes is a master musician. One of my favorite all-time musicians, period. But then I got into watching this video with It's hard to explain, but it was an Irish tune done by Gary Moore. Now, Gary Moore, a lot of people don't know who he is. He played a little bit with Thin Lizzy. He had a big solo career, but huge solo career. But his song that he did, "Over the Hills," it's on his Wild Frontier album. Well, the whole album is great. A lot of Irish lullabies on it, but he does "Over the Hills and Far Away," and it's been redone so many different times by great musicians. But his version is one of these songs that changed me into going into Gary Moore himself. Gary Moore is one of the top five guitarists of my world. He always has been, and everybody that I've listened with music or played with music knows that my love for Gary Moore is. I mean, I practiced on a lot of his music. I would practice just playing along with him. So, anywho, we've got different musicians in this time frame that I'm trying to study and get a good grip on what I want to do. At the same time, I am seeing a guitar instructor because I'm young. I'm 13 years old, and my parents, my dad, bought me my first guitar, which was a Phantom. And I got to playing and enjoying playing, and But my guitar teacher kept on asking me, "Well, can you break it down?" I was like, "Okay, no, I can't. I'm just playing along with the song. I mean, I'm learning along with the music." He goes, "Okay, let's break it down." So I picked a song and we broke it down. Well, the song was Judas Priest, "Painkiller." So he actually taught me how to play the rhythm of "Painkiller," and I was so proud of myself, man. I mean, it took me 3 weeks, but I got it. But it also gave me a better perspective of what musicians and what guitarists actually go through to write music and to be able to play that over and over and over again. I mean, some of these guys go on tour for 8 months straight, playing 4 to 5 nights a week. And that's every night the same song over and over again, man. And they do it. They do it for us. Down and out, they're making money from us, only from the touring. Everything that, I mean, they're not making money off of their music, off of the sales. I mean, not this day and age, but back then they were. I mean, Napster was just starting to come out, and we weren't downloading or pirating for a good year. I think it was like when Injustice for All came out is when I started in pirating. But anywho, I can sit here after learning how the structure is to better understand guitar. So I went and backtracked like I always do, and then I started studying the people that you really don't hear about in that day, like Michael Schenker. Now, Michael, he MSG, UFO, Scorpions. He started the Scorpions when he was 14 years old. Okay. Now, when I started this, and he had MSG out at the time, and he had that album, and the album that really changed the song, not so much the album, but the one song. It's called "Give Me Your Love." That rhythm, that flow, that harmonic flow in that song, just it changed the direction of how I wanted to play my music. So I'm going all out now, and I'm going with the Randy Rhoads. I'm re-listening to the Ozzy, the old days. I bootlegged the copy of Randy live, and the mistakes of D at the end. You know, I'm going head into Eddie Van Halen and finding out that they had back and forth problems. But Eddie, oh, genius, legend, icon, R.I.P. man. I mean, Saint Eddie. He blew everybody away, and he changed everything. Now, the funny thing is, Eddie, you know, he said that Michael Schenker was, you know, a big influence and some of the iconic players. You know, you got Chuck Berry. Oh, Chuck Berry, genius. You know, but these iconic players everybody knows and loves. Now, during this research, I come to find out that I've got some country loving family in my world. Apparently, I'm related to Chet Atkins. Now, if anybody knows about country, Chet Atkins is actually a pretty damn good guitar player. Now, I had no idea, but my grandmother, you know, God rest her soul, she told me flat out, and we got a weird bloodline, but I tell you what, on my father's side, I belong to the Chet Atkins family. Now, when I did the research on Chet Atkins and I found out my family had a couple of records of him, you know, so I got to listening, and it's not bad. It was pretty. He used styles that reminded me of a slow hand speedster, you know, that elusiveness. Then I ran into Hee Haw. Now, I don't understand how I went from Chet Atkins to Hee Haw, but I did. And I thank God for it every day. I searched the world over and I thought I found true love, but you met another and you were gone. Hee Haw introduced me to guitar players like Roy Clark, Glenn Campbell. Those two guys. To this day, I will still post on Facebook Glenn Campbell. That man could play a guitar. Then I come to find out that there's quite a few other iconic guitar players in the country music world that nobody knows, like Vince Gill. That man can play. Oh, Ricky Skaggs. Oh man, you know, and that era, some of them are from bluegrass, you know, and that's another genre of music that, all in all, gets into a form of speed metal. I mean, you hear them banjos going, or you hear the background speed of the bass tone, and you're going full out. You put distortion on that, man, you got yourself a killer, at least a, you know, white nationalist theme. Anyways, now, all in all, I've given you a lot of different names, and during the 85, 86, 87 era, that's where I studied the most. And I went from the country, learning all that. I did some blues, checking around because of my interest in Stevie Ray Vaughan, you know. But then I come into these bands that a lot of people don't listen to, like Sabotage. Now, there are only a few handful that make the top 5, but Chris Oliva, Chris of Sabotage, he died in 92, 93, car wreck, but his music, his guitar playing truly is inspiring. Now, there is a side story to all this. That there was a time where I was working at a music store, and with this music store, I was able to go to different venues and watch different shows. I got to see a lot of great shows, and one of them was Sabotage. I got there 2 hours ahead of time, and I had all access because we knew the owner of the venue, and I was able to go all access. I walked around in the back, and I just sat and I watched. And people were coming in and out. None of the band members were there yet. I think they were probably all out in the buses in the back. But I just sat there and watched. And it was come time to show time, and they didn't have an opening act. It was just full 2 hour show, and boom, they were gone. So I get up and I start walking out, and I'm wearing my jean jacket that had Metallica Ride the Lightning on the back, and it was signed by Anthrax, Iron Maiden, uh, some of the guys in Megadeth, including Dave Mustaine. Um, who else? I had Wrathchild America, um, the Black Crows. Uh, I just had quite a few. Ace Frehley was on there. So, and I was walking out and I said, "Hey, what do you got there?" And I didn't know what the hell, so I turned around, and I said, "I ain't got nothing." And lo and behold, it's Chris, and he was admiring my jacket as he was walking in. He had his guitar and everything, and I told him flat out that I thought he was one of the most iconic guitar players ever, and I was in awe. I was in shock. I am 16 going on 17, and I'm seeing one of my iconic gods in person. A lot of people don't know this story because I keep it to myself. And shame that I lost the jacket, but he signed it and he thanked me, and I went on my way. I went right up front, and I got to watch him perform for 2 hours. Actually, 2 hours and 20 minutes. And I got a pick. He threw it at me, and it's just, I'm this 6'4", 6'5" at the time, 6'4", kid with a goatee and a mullet. I had the mullet. I did. I I'm not ashamed of it, but I I got my jacket signed. I got a pick from Chris, and when I heard that he had died, I cried like a baby. I did, because he had so much more to offer. I mean, Gutter Ballet, that was pure. I loved it from beginning to end, and it transformed into Trans Siberian Orchestra. Today, you have to believe and understand that Sabotage is the group that also created Trans Siberian Orchestra. Okay? And that was all Chris and his brother. So, I can't, I can honestly say that he is number 2 of my all-time list. Because number 1 came out with Ozzy, No Rest for the Wicked. I love that album from beginning to end, but I didn't really do a whole lot of research on the guitar player because I had heard that Ozzy had fired Jake and was looking for somebody, and the auditions were out. In the music world, a lot of people already heard, they knew what was going on. And if you sent in a tape of your audition of your playing, they would send you a thank you letter back. Well, we had a guitar player in good old Red Oak or in that area, that sent in one and got the letter back. And he, I don't know, I'm not going to name any names, but he was also quite influential in my music world. My music world, not what I've heard, but what I've learned. He taught me quite a bit. Anyway, back at the ranch, you know, all in all, I've got all these different thoughts going in my head, like who's going to replace Jake? Jake was awesome, man. You know, so No Rest comes out, boom, iconic guitar playing beginning to end. As soon as that first riff hits, I'm done. But in my ignorance, at the same time, you've got great albums like Iron Maiden's Power Slave. You've got you got Rat coming out. You've got Mick Mars with Motley Crue coming out. You've got boom, boom. You're getting hit with so many things, and at the same time, you've got George Lynch and Dokken. They're blossoming again. So, I mean, you've got all these iconic guitar players that you're getting bombarded with, and it only happens on Friday and Saturday nights. Okay? And that was it for the longest time. That was the only time. Okay? Then you had these groundbreaking videos of, like, the lighter Poison, Rat, all these lighter versions of rock and roll and metal. Okay, and they are awesome. You've got some great guitar players going during this whole time. Okay, but you're not getting that metal. You know, you're not getting that push. So, you know, the only time we're getting anything is through Headbangers. So with Zakk Wylde, I could only get bits and pieces. Well, Guitar Player, Guitar World Guitar Magazine covered that for me. Thank the Lord, because with him becoming a young badass legend on the metal scene, we were able to get more articles about him and more on his style, his equipment, what was going on. We got the gist of this new guitar guy. Pride and Glory, about the same time, he's working with a whole different form of guitar playing. And he's showing the world he is capable of blowing you away. Now, I get mixed with my mental health. I got mixed up in a lot of different things, and my music world led me to Red Oak, Iowa, where I met up with a lot of great people who were getting into the same music. And at the same time, the grunge scene was coming into play. 1991, you know, Nirvana was hitting the scene. But so was great guitarists like Jerry Cantrell. You know, Man in the Box. Iconic. But you've got they started genre with the grunge, and a lot of great musicians. Chris Cornell, his voice iconic, but no great, I want to say, lavishing musicians with the guitar comes to mind until I get in a car with two buddies of mine. They slip in this new CD that he had gotten from Omaha. We're just driving. We're doing laps in Red Oak, basically up and down the strip, listening to tunes, talking, having a great time. They pop in the CD. It's Black Label Society. And that was it. That was it. I was hooked. As soon as it started, he got me. Like 3 days later, I got BLS tattooed on my arm. Zakk Wylde has been number one in my book since day one. Okay, so, to answer your question, to me, Zakk Wylde is the greatest guitar player ever. With Chris being number 2, John Sykes being number 3, Eddie Van Halen being number 4, Gary Moore number 5. and I'm going to give you 10. So, number 6, Joe Satriani. Number 7, Randy Rhoads. Number 8, Michael Schenker. Number 9, Dave Mustaine. Number 10, Jakey Lee. Now, if I'm missing any of them, I'm sorry, but that's just off the top of my head. Now, I've been burning trees for a while on this. I have been on YouTube, researching, going through my past, listening to songs that trigger those emotions where I'm right then and there, and I know the changes that occur at that moment, like with the movies Crossroads and Rockstar. Those were huge for me. Then you've got songs like Give Me Your Love by Michael Schenker. You've got Blue Murder, the entire album. Okay? And then you've got Chris, his technique. Prelude to Madness with Hall of the Mountain King. Iconic. But you can't forget the great ones like Tony Iommi, Jimmy Page, the ones that brought us in. And you can't forget the new generation like Jason Hook. Pop Evil has got a great guitar sound. You know, these are ones that I haven't researched yet, but I love to listen to. Five Finger Death Punch. I love them. Okay. Pop Evil, Ghost, the twin playing in Ghost. In that moment, you know, there are a lot of great guitarists out there that I have not done the research yet. So, that will be probably a part 2 to this, ladies and gentlemen. So, I've gotten a little bit overboard on this, but, you know, it's hard for me to not give kudos to bands like, you know, Cinderella, Tom Kiefer. Excellent, excellent. Richie Sambora, excellent as well. You know, I can't. I feel like I'm missing so many great ones because there were so many great ones. You've got the Bay Area badasses like a Testament, Alex, Mick. They are awesome. Armored Saint, Anthrax, Scotty. You know, it's hard for me. I can sit here. One of the gateways was Dave Mustaine introducing us to like Chris Poland. You've got Marty Friedman was introduced. There are so many different bands that have introduced, and the one that I forgot to mention that is iconic is Nuno Bettencourt. I love Nuno. From day one, Extreme, I have everything they've ever done and him. He's got a lot of great solo work. You know, Yngwie Malmsteen. Another classical player that I love to sit and listen to with my headphones on. You know, and then you've got your Leonard Skinner is also another great man with guitar work that'll blow your mind. The Eagles. You know, those are things outside of my genre that I really enjoy listening to as a guitar, classical guitar playing. You know, there are so many players out there that have their own unique abilities that are in living color. Vernon Reid. Oh, I love Cult of Personality. It's chaotic, but yet in the melody, it's in the flow. You know, that's a great jazz fusion player on a distorted tone. There's so many things that are mixed in, and so many guitar players that are mixing things up and genres. So, if I've missed anybody, you feel free to let me know. I'm on Facebook. You PM me. This has been a battle. I hope that somebody has won. Peace out. This is Being Bipolar, Doobie Snacks. Have a great one.